Welcome everybody to the Scale Up Show. This is your host, Ryan Staley, and I have a very special guest with me today. I have Will Barron, who is the author of Making Selling Simple. He's also the host of the Salesman Podcast. He's got over 1,000 podcasts recorded, which is like 2.5x myself. So that's freaking impressive. Has a flagship Selling Made Simple Academy where he's got over 2,000 students in there, and they have sold over $992 million annually. Will, welcome. Happy to have you on the show, man.
Thanks for having me on, Ryan. I'm looking forward to having a chat with you, mate.
Yeah, dude. I'm loving having a fellow podcaster on here, sales aficionado, if you will. So it's really good, man. Like, I'm excited to talk to you. And I think anybody who has the persistence level to record well over 1,000 podcasts is got my respect, because there's so many dabblers now, right? So walk me through your background real quick, dude. Just like in terms of like a 1 minute origin story about who you are, how you got to this point, what you're focused on, your mission. If you could do that in a minute, that'd be fantastic. Maybe
cool.
2 at max.
Let's I'll visually set a timer up here, and I'll do my best. Okay, without rabbiting on too fast, and the audience won't be able to understand me because I speak fast anyway. But started off degree in chemistry, ran a small business whilst I was at university to pay for rent and all that kind of stuff. So I knew that I wanted to do something entrepreneurial later on. But started off in chemistry, then moved into chemical sales because I was a terrible chemist, but wanted to do something to make some money. Got fired from that role because I missed a decimal. I put a decimal place in the wrong spot on an invoice. They had to honor the invoice. So the GlaxoSmithKline got $40,000 or $50,000 worth of platinum for the great price of $5,000. So that was a quick kind of, you might not be as details focused for this role as what we need. So from there, went into medical devices, worked for a couple of medical device companies, selling endoscopic camera systems to surgeons. And that's what led me then on the journey of salesman.com this sounds like a cliche webinar intro, but I very literally sat there one day after coming home from work and typed into Google, how to close more deals, how to improve my sales skills. And everything that popped up was webinars, YouTube videos, content podcasts from women with weird shoulder pads in the power suits and dudes with gross suits from the 90s that obviously may be in style at one point, but certainly won't in style anymore. And everything that they were telling me to do, if I tried any of those shenanigans of a surgeon, I would have just been kicked out of the operating room, never would have been allowed back in. And one account here in the UK, one hospital could be £2-3 million account over the course of just a couple of years. So that to me was then a sign that there was a gap in the market. The knowledge is obviously out there. People were obviously having success in their roles, and I was always in the middle of the pack, not middle of the pack in an elite group of sales performers in the medical device space I was in, but certainly not a high performer within that group of individuals. So I knew that there was room to improve. So I started the podcast. I started interviewing sales experts. Some people that you've interviewed as well, Ryan, Andy Paul, legends like that in the space. That got me so far. I then started interviewing. This is how I got to 1,000 episodes, because I couldn't have done 1,000 episodes of the show just interviewing sales experts. I would have wanted to blow my head off at about episode 730. I started interviewing athletes, Olympic athletes, Formula One drivers, hostage negotiators, people like that. And that was then the kind of the aha moment for me of most high performers have structure, have process, and that's what they rely on, which is what salespeople tend to not do. They feel like they've got the gift of the gab, as we would say in the UK, or they blag things, they just go with the flow. And the real elite sales high performers are all process-based. They might not realize it, they might be unconsciously competent at what they're doing, but that was the thing that then led me to building my own training program and everything else that we do now. So yeah, that was that one kind of quick Googling session and realizing that, hey, what's being discussed here might have worked 20 years ago, but it certainly doesn't work anymore.
Dude, I love that. And you know what I like is, I don't know why I just had this visual of you like in that 80s garb with like the suit too big and the massive shoulder pads. I think you should do like a throwback episode where you act serious, you act normal, and do one of your trainings, but have that look, almost like the Anchorman-ish look. Like, I don't know if you've seen that, but like something like that, man. I think that would do well. And I think it'd be endearing to people. What's your thoughts on that, man?
I think I should get some of the sales trainers that I have never really named names, but maybe inadvertently slagged off over the years, and I should invite them all on, and we should all do it in 80s power suits.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. Yeah, I love that, man. So, okay, so on a bigger and better thing. So let's talk about two things, man. Like, and I think this is such a huge aspect right now that I think many people are missing. And this is like, as we kind of talked about on the pre-show, like I work with folks on like AI skill transformation or like scaling up organizations, specifically on the enterprise sales side. And so one of the things though that I see many of the folks missing are the attention side of sales, right? So there's attention, which is almost like the marketing of the distribution. However, if you're attacking and you're trying to get into large organizations or top clients, like most folks miss that, right? And they try and go straight for the cold email, which has got like the miserably, terribly lowest rate ever right now, as I'm getting spammed in my email with like shitty messaging. And so like, I want to talk to you about this because like with you did an amazing job with the podcast, with the content that you've created to generate that attention specifically for salespeople. So walk us through that, man. What's your strategy? What's your plan? And how do you execute that to get attention at scale? Because I think that's the one thing many salespeople are missing.
Yeah. I'll explain how I built Salesman.com and the content there and the reason behind it. But pre that, I think it's important to say that if you can just call someone or you are just able to email someone, to book meetings, you absolutely shouldn't be doing content marketing. You should be looking, because everyone wants to be a YouTuber, and you're going to get even more and more of that as I'm at the top end of millennial, as the millennials and everyone else below them kind of filter up into the job market. Everyone's going to want to sit behind a screen, become a LinkedIn influencer, and try and find and close more deals on the back of that. If that's what your market wants, amazing, great. And I'll explain how I did it in a second. But there's plenty of people in my program. There's a lad in the program, really good lad. He sells a bunch of services and tools and literally beer to breweries, pubs, that kind of thing. He just picks up the phone and can book 10 meetings in the morning. And so he was asking me about content marketing. I was like, that's a terrible idea. It might build you more trust, but it's a 3 to 5 year play for the size of his organization to get it done and the people he's competing with, when he can just spend the morning, pick up the phone and book his calendar out all week. So first thing, we want the most efficient process to book a meeting so then we can progress the sales process. If you are unable to break through on the phone, for example, with me, you just can't cold call me because my number doesn't exist on the internet. I've had a bounty out there for 10 years now. If you cold call me and I answer and you get a pitch in, I'll give you $1,000. And no one's managed it. So that's in the market of Will Barron, you just can't cold call me. If you cold email me, I'll probably get back to you at some point, but it's going to be a slow process because I get loads of email. But I consume lots of content. So that leads us on to the content play, right? So it's understanding your market. So when I started Salesman.com, we had YouTube content, both skitty, funny content, debatable of how skitty or funny it was, more serious training content on the YouTube platform, the audio podcast. I started a online magazine. So Grant Cardone was on the cover of the first episode of that magazine. Who else did we try? LinkedIn. At that point, did LinkedIn. We did Instagram. At that point, quotes were popping off on Instagram because it was more, obviously shifted now to more video. I tried everything. The only thing that people cared about was the audio podcast. Now, if I was smarter, I probably wouldn't have had to try everything. I could have made that assumption. Salespeople don't want to come home at the evening and open a magazine about sales. They don't want to put on the telly and watch a video about sales, but they might listen to a podcast on the way to work, on the way back from the gym or wherever it is. So I could have perhaps shortcutted the process myself, but we did all this kind of stuff, and the podcast was the only thing that mattered. So for getting attention, most salespeople jump on the LinkedIn because there is just such a large amount of salespeople on LinkedIn that they think that bubble is like that for every marketplace. And it typically isn't. So you've got to set your expectations. If you're searching for that attention, understand where your marketplace is, and then we can dive into the content creation process further if you like. But answering questions that your buyers have is essentially all you're doing. You could be doing it on a street corner. If you're selling to people who hang around that street corner, you could be doing it on a more sophisticated platform online. It doesn't matter. You just got to be in front of your buyers and answering their questions so that you become the obvious person that they want to work with.
Yeah. No, I think that's good advice, man. Yeah, you definitely got to have the starting point because like that's the number one like point of entry because everybody's like, I heard LinkedIn's the best, right? It's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
well, is your client buyer even on there, right? So that's like table stakes. One thing though that I've seen, and so I'll work with chief revenue officers or CEOs. I'll have people that will not engage with a single piece of my content that have told me they've been following me for years.
Yep.
So like that's one interesting take. I'll hit the podcast, and then another one that is not often spoken about a lot is, and this is exactly what you're talking about, where you're answering your prospects' questions. I'll do that on like private communities for decision makers because they'll just pop in and they're like, hey, how do I handle this? Or does anybody have any ideas on handling this or do this? And that works like amazing. But kind of like with picking up the phone and just calling people, a lot of folks don't take the time to do that and realize like, hey, you might need to answer 10 questions before someone's interested, or, it might be 5, right? But a lot of people won't do that and put in the cycle. So what's your thoughts on that?
There's an activation energy that you need to reach before someone will engage with you. You can
Mhm.
do it one to many via content. You can do it one to one on a cold call if you're incredibly skilled, not incredibly skilled, if you're decently skilled at cold calling, but you're getting the right message in front of the right person at the right time. If you're hitting
Right.
those 3 variables, it can be done
Agree.
almost in an instant. If Warren Buffett calls me now, I'll probably put him on speakerphone and we're both going to chat to him because the activation energy for Warren Buffett is very low. The activation energy for someone selling, for example, I can only speak about myself here, but for me, some kind of crypto product is incredibly high. So I've got no interest in it at all. Don't care. And I've got a bunch of negative connotations just from kind of the media reporting on it and my lack of understanding of it. So you've got to work out what that activation energy is. And then all you try and do is hit that activation energy. Because what we're talking about here from a content standpoint, you can talk about brand, you can talk about nurturing. All I'm interested in content is booking that first meeting, and then I want a one-on-one. Then I want a one-on-one conversation with people moving forward. I don't want to nurture people with content. People will ask me at the end of a sales call for like more information or some kind of brochure. I said we don't have one. If you're interested, then we should book another call. And we should move things forward that way, like
Mhm.
adults, as opposed to just firing around things. Let's be assertive. You're a good fit. I think you're a good fit for us. Do you want to move forward with this? Yes or no? We open-ended questions to allow them to coach us on what the next steps might be. But it's a problem when I see people again using content as a crutch when a conversation is going to get the job done in half the time, and you're going to add a lot more value to someone typically with a conversation as well.
Yeah, I think that's great, man. I agree because like a lot of times it'd be like, well, do you have any information? Sometimes not always, but they'll have that and just be like, well, just tell me what your question is. I'll answer right now. And I'm like, and then it's like, I think there's a lot of value in being like hyper direct too. Like at least that's the way it is. Like I've shifted and I'm like, hey, this is where I'm at. This is what my pricing is. These are the outcomes and these are the next steps. Like, and I'll do this on the first call now. Like,
Yep.
does this align or not? If not, it's okay. Like, and make it easy for them to say no so they don't feel like obligated. Now, there's a cultural difference in the UK for the US with this, I think. And then there's even cultural differences based on the region in the US from what I'm seeing, like West Coast, East Coast, Central versus the South, which we could do a whole episode on. But that's one of the things that I'm seeing. So I know we just mentioned and we bagged on content as being a crutch, right? So, however, let's get into what you did on the content side so that you could do it effectively. So, what's your take on that, man? And how did you leverage content to really attract and generate interest and outcomes?
So I very literally interviewed people that are smarter than me, not necessarily with a bigger audience, and then repurposed that content multiple times until it was of value to buyers at different parts of the buyer's journey. So some salespeople want to kid themselves in that they are that they're learning by listening to a somewhat fun educational piece of content, right? So I might be interviewing a sales expert, but we barely talk about sales. So that's super top of funnel, just so that they recognize my face and they recognize this red logo that I've just been like ramming down people's throats for the past 10 years. And the number of people that I become an inbound lead for me, or I go and speak at an event or do some consulting, and they go, oh, you someone else at the event or around the conference table, I recognize you from somewhere. and they can't quite put the finger on it, but it's because they've seen the brand over and over and over again. So that then builds that little bit of unconscious trust that you're not just out of nowhere. So you've got that kind of content, but then I try and then distill it down of, can you make it into a 3 best tips video or blog? Then the next step from that is to add your personal insights and take to it. So that's when I would, both myself and then later on in the process via a writer who is using me as a kind of like an avatar and a persona to build content that comes from me and my perspective for my specific audience rather than more general advice. And then beyond that, you need to start doing outbound. Because at that point, if someone's listened to that content, consumed that content, had value from it, it's worth asking them, hey, if you enjoyed this, if did this solve your problem? Yes, no. If not, would it make sense to have a quick conversation to see if a bit of coaching, consulting, one-on-one, whatever it is, could solve that problem instead?
Yeah, I think that's good, man. I like the. Did you ever see? I'm trying to remember which book it is, but Daniel Priestley wrote it. Did you ever see his book?
Yeah, I've read all this. Yeah.
So
Key Person of Influence.
Yeah, I don't know if it's not Key Person of Influence. It's I think it's a different one. But the one that I'm talking about, I'm trying to look at my bookshelf over there because my bookshelf's over there. I'm like, oh, maybe I could find it. Damn it, it's not popping out, man. But what you're talking about, there's actually a study in one of his books where he identified like that celebrity feel of how people achieve that. And the formula was like combined with the study that Google did on it as well. And I think it was like 14 different interactions of content across 4 platforms for a total of like 4 hours. And if someone has that experience, then they feel like you're a celebrity as long as they like you, right? Or like what you're doing, right? Within your presence. So that's kind of what that reminds me of, man, where you're talking about where people are like, I've seen you before. You look familiar or something like that. So I think that's spot on. And then the outbound, before we wrap things up, because we're just about up on time, what's your number one or top 3 measures of advice for outbound? Because that's one of the things that everybody's getting pushed more towards with full cycle now. And then, I see people struggle with the most at the same time.
Are you messaging the right person? That should be pretty easy. Look at your current customers, who closed the easiest, who did the biggest deal sizes, reverse engineer that. Right person, right message. Message is more complicated. You've got to create something. This is something that all salespeople seemingly struggle with. I've coached, there's been 2,300 people come through our program now. No one has nailed this. I don't think no one's nailed this on before they've kind of start working with me. It's got to be about the buyer, right? So you've got features, benefits, great. No one gives a shit. What are the desires of the buyer? How can you tie what you do with not even solving a problem, the desire behind that problem, why they want to solve it. So message and then timing. If you've got the timing, that turbocharges everything else. But it's very difficult to get. You can make a bold hypothesis on what's going on within the account, within the organization. You can leverage trigger events and different things externally to make a good guess at things. Time is a little bit more difficult. But if you've got those 3 elements with your outbound, all you're trying with the goal of all you're trying to do is book the meeting. You're not trying to close a deal. You're not trying to nurture this individual. You're not trying to necessarily even build trust. You're just trying to give them just enough where they go, Will's emailed me, and I would not be doing my due diligence in my role if I jump on a quick call with him. That son of a bitch has got me. I've got to just jump on 5 minutes of him, and then I'll suss out whether we're good fit together, work together, or whatever it is. That's all you're trying to do. The barrier is not that high. When you take away all the product stuff, all the other crap that people put in their emails, you're just trying to elicit that meeting with a little bit of curiosity. That's essentially the process.
Yeah. Great advice, man. I love the targeting advice. That's one of the things that I recommend too, is I would live and bathe in the in Pareto's principle, right? And I use that for targeting as well with what you mentioned. Messaging, we'll talk about how to use AI fueled messaging in the next episode. There's some really cool things I've been discovering from working with people on that. So that was one of the things that I struggled with for the longest time too, as a rep. And I wouldn't say I struggled with it. I just would take me a really long time to just have a solid message. And so I think that's disheartening for folks. And then at the same time, I think direct outcome, create that curiosity in their minds that they have to do something. So love those 3 episodes. Where can people find you? or I should say those 3 frameworks. Where can people find you? Where can they learn more about you, man? And then we'll wrap up part 1.
Cool. Everything I do is all over salesman.com. There's a couple of free books there. Everything I know, literally everything I know about sales is available in those 2 books. Download the books. If you need help implementing any of it, that's where potentially one of our training programs can come in.
Love it, man. Well, thanks for being on, Will. This was a lot of fun, dude. I love nerd out on sales with folks like you. And it was really great getting your perspective, man.
Cheers, Ryan. I appreciate you and appreciate you having me on, mate.
And thanks for joining us. And we will see you on the next episode.